he is gambling that if he can get Ghislaine Maxwell to say something very obliging, saying Donald Trump did nothing wrong, Donald Trump was never on the island, Donald Trump never had anything untoward in his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and Ghislaine Maxwell gets free, that the American people will think, OK, that's fine. Because so far, the great salesman has not been able to sell "there's nothing to see here."
But once again, Trump is not really helping the story to go away by just providing a whole list of people that should be testifying. And I guess, there will be many in the American public who think we'd quite like to hear what they have to say. Yeah, go for it. But there's some notable gaps in that list.
Mr. President, what are you doing up there? Taking a little walk. Come down and talk to us.
That is Donald Trump on the roof of the White House. He looks bizarre. I mean, at a passing glance, it looks absolutely mad. But it is part of a carefully constructed walkabout with security detail to see the site beneath him, which will soon be housing the White House ballroom.
Yeah, the intention is to spend $200 million from donors, not US taxpayers, to create a kind of ballroom like he's got at Mar-a-Lago on the White House estate. Tempting to say fiddler on the roof, but maybe given his problems with Jeffrey Epstein, this is an attempt at diversion. More cat on a hot tin roof. Welcome to the Newsagents USA.
The Newsagents USA.
It's John.
It's Emily.
Where are you?
I've run away. I've actually run away from you for one whole month. But I'm here in spirit and indeed, well, in voice.
Well, it's very nice to see you. Look, we've got to start with the Council of War, I don't know how else to describe it, that is taking place later today at J.D. Vance's residence in Washington, D.C., with the president, with the president's chief of staff, Susie Weil, apparently Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, apparently Kash Patel, the FBI director, and even the deputy Attorney General, who, of course, went and saw Ghislaine Maxwell, with one subject. What the hell are we going to do about this mess? Because this mess is now engulfing the Trump presidency, and every attempt to deflect and to get people looking the other way, people keep returning to this central issue of Trump's handling of the Epstein affair and the question marks being raised about, does he have a role in it?
Yeah, and even since we last spoke to you about this, so much has changed. Ghislaine Maxwell, who, as you know, was convicted for 20 years, sent to prison on charges of sex trafficking, human trafficking, has now been removed from a high security prison where she was carrying out her days to a much more relaxed, more open prison, what we call, I guess, a white collar prison. And there are a lot of people inside who are very, very unhappy that she's joined them. And there are a lot of people on the outside, namely her victims, who are really wondering what on earth is going on and what Trump is up to. Now, I think we should just talk you through Trump's response when he was asked about why she'd moved and what had happened in those meetings with Todd Blanche, because they're now talking about releasing the transcripts of those 8 hours or so of interviews that she did with him. And here's what Donald Trump said when he was asked about it directly.
Were you aware of and did you personally approve the prison transfer for Ghislaine Maxwell that your Justice Department...
I didn't know about it at all. No, I read about it just like you did.
And do you believe that she is
It's not a very uncommon thing.
Do you believe that she's credible to be listening to? Your Deputy Attorney General sat down with her recently.
Well, let me tell you, he's a very talented man. His name is Todd Blanche. He's a very legitimate person, very high, I just a very highly thought of person, respected by everybody.
Okay, quick fact check here. There is no chance, there is absolutely zero chance that Trump read about that or saw it on the television like the rest of us. Trump would have been in on exactly what was happening as a consequence of that meeting and what has been decided. It is also, fact check, an incredibly uncommon thing. You do not simply move criminals, convicted criminals, from one very, very high security prison where they are deemed to be a risk to the public to somewhere that is considered an open white collar prison for no apparent reason. No reason has been given. No explanation has been given. The victims are frankly furious.
Look, I'll just insert one other little factoid in all of this. Prison transfers are normally conducted by the US Marshals Service. That is the established mechanism by which you move a prisoner across county lines or from one sort of penal establishment to another. This was not done by the Marshals Department. It was done by Department of Justice staff very quietly, very swiftly. This did not go through normal mechanisms. The idea, as you say, Melis, that Trump knew nothing about it is risible. It is just inconceivable, given how much political airtime, oxygen this is taking up, and that he can't seem to get shot of the subject. There is just no way at all that he didn't know about it and sanction it himself. But the gamble in all of this, and you just do have to talk about the gamble, he is gambling that if he can get Ghislaine Maxwell to say something very obliging, saying Donald Trump did nothing wrong, Donald Trump was never on the island, Donald Trump never had anything untoward in his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and Ghislaine Maxwell gets free, that the American people will think, okay, that's fine. Because so far, he has not, the great salesman has not been able to sell. There's nothing to see here.
I think that's why this whole question of whether they're going to release the transcripts is really interesting, because Maxwell's lawyers are saying that they haven't been given a chance to review the transcripts. They say it has a harm her public image. I don't understand how that could be right. But I guess this calls into question what the whole release of the transcripts is about, because it feels to me like this is the wrong thing that they should be releasing. Everyone knows the thing that they should be releasing, the thing that Trump keeps on saying doesn't exist. There is nothing to see here. Bloomberg recently did a report saying in whatever the Epstein file is, his name appears nearly 1,000 times, right? So there is a clamour to have something released, and in its place, Trump or those around Trump, those who will, let's say, rid him of a turbulent child abuser, are now trying to find something to move the conversation on. So this is why the whole conversation is now turning to, should we be looking at the transcripts of the conversations? Now, I don't know what Ghislaine would have said to Todd Blanche, and I don't even know that what was in the interview would be as relevant as maybe a conversation that they might have had around the edges before or after. But it does seem that, once again, he's trying to sort of get everyone to look over here so you don't look over there.
Yeah.
And I think the fact, just to go back to your war room, it does feel like Cobra, doesn't it? It's like a Cobra meeting where J.D. Vance is sitting there and Pam Bondi is sitting there and Trump is sitting there, and you presumably have like the finest MAGA minds unable to make this story that they have unleashed go away.
And there are just fascinating little details. I don't know whether you've seen the New York Times today, but they've kind of published photos from inside Epstein's New York townhouse. And among the kind of curios that you get there is a framed photo of Melania and Donald Trump, which sort of suggests that they were still friends, or someone's planted it there, or I'm sure Donald Trump will say it's total fake news and doesn't exist and it's all been made up by the New York Times. But, let's take that at face value. The other thing you've got is the House issuing a subpoena for Bill and Hillary Clinton. Again, another attempt to look the other way. And if you don't think this is history repeating itself, remember the second presidential debate in 2016 between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton in St. Louis, Missouri, where Donald Trump brings to the debate a number of the accusers of Bill Clinton for sexual misconduct. It was absolutely an attempt for Donald Trump to change the subject after the Pussygate tape so that he could say, yeah, I may be bad, but that Bill Clinton is even worse, and Hillary Clinton allowed it all to happen. That's what he's done before, and that's what he's doing now.
Yeah, it sort of seemed quietly, horribly brilliant at the time. I don't think it's looking that clever now, is it? Because when you've got this list of Bill and Hillary subpoenaed by the House Oversight Committee to testify as part of those investigations, and you look down the list, and yes, he's brought in, James Comey, doesn't like James Comey either, Robert Mueller, who did the Russia investigation, doesn't like Robert Mueller either. Former Attorney General Loretta Lynch, Eric Holder, doesn't like them either. You suddenly sort of go, oh, wait a sec. So there's lots of sort of Democrat or Democrat adjacent people on this list, or indeed some of your own sworn enemies. There are a few notable gaps. We don't see your former Homeland Security Advisor, Alex Acosta, the very man who cut the plea deal for Epstein back in 2008 that made it ridiculously lenient on him and allowed him essentially to walk free from jail. And we don't see, what's the other missing name? Oh, God, don't tell me. Oh, God, who's the other one? Who's the other one that should be subpoenaed who does a bit? Oh, yeah, we don't see Donald Trump. So there is this whole sort of parade of, if you like, enemies that are now trying to be pushed to do a perp walk. They probably won't ever testify. They have presidential privilege. At least, Bill Clinton has presidential privilege. I very much doubt that we'll see him testify. But once again, Trump is not really helping the story to go away by just providing a whole list of people that should be testifying. And I guess, there will be many in the American public who think we'd quite like to hear what they have to say. Yeah, go for it. But there's some notable gaps in that list.
Yeah, absolutely. Although two of his attorney generals have been summoned from the first term, Bill Barr and Jeff Sessions, the former Alabama senator. I mean, they have been summoned, but they also fell foul of Donald Trump.
Yes.
So Donald Trump won't have any hesitation in kind of...
I mean, Jeff Sessions memorably recused himself over the Russia investigation. So he basically ducked that one, didn't want to support Trump. Bill Barr, I think, is a more complicated one because Bill Barr was the Attorney General when the Mueller report came out. And essentially, he manipulated what that report said to get it over the line and make Trump happy because I think the Mueller report ended up saying that there wasn't enough proof to connect Trump with Russia. And Bill Barr was the one who gave Trump that line and said there has been no collusion.
Exactly.
Wasn't strictly true. But anyway, Bill Barr then, I think, fell foul of Trump because he publicly, tried to tell the world what he was like. In other words, we have a list of Trump's enemies here. We don't have many of the people close to Epstein at the time, which would include the President Trump.
So let's go back to where we started and this Council of War. I was really struck by some polling evidence I saw that's been conducted by UMass, the University of Massachusetts, where my son studied for a year, incidentally, which shows that Americans appear to be dismayed at Trump's handling of the Epstein case. 70% of Americans believe he has handled this issue not too well or not well at all. And nearly 2/3 believe his administration is hiding information about Epstein. Now, in a country where we say it's split down the middle and you get 70% saying, hang on, this is all going wrong and you're lying and you're not telling us the truth, then you've got a real problem. And I think that the public attitude towards this is really mixed and the MAGA community is utterly split, as we've discussed on previous occasions, between those who say, oh, we've got to get behind Trump, and those who've been at the vanguard of this saying there is something rotten here. How can Donald Trump say there's nothing to see?
Yeah, well, one person who's tried to get ahead of this is the Democrat Stephen Klubeck, who is the candidate for California governor. And he's launched an attack ad on Trump. And you might remember, if I cast you back to November, there was one very famous ad that really punched through, and it was the they-them ad. It tried to tie Kamala to trans rights issues and say that Trump would have none of it. And it said, she is for they-them and Donald Trump is for you. Well, this ad has now been turned around and used very much against Trump, tying him to the they-them that is Epstein and Maxwell.
It's laughable that it wasn't a good friendship, if not his best friend.
It's been reported that Trump invited Epstein to his wedding.
Weddings are super close friends and family. It's hard to believe, but it's true. Even the conservative media is shocked.
We also found this photo of Donald Trump with two of his children talking to Jeffrey Epstein.
Were some of the workers that were taken from you young women?
The answer is yes.
Trump is for they, them. Stephen Klubeck is for you.
Smart ad, isn't it? I mean, really smart.
I mean, I think the question that we have been asking for the last 6 months is, when are the Democrats going to start fighting back? What is their message? Where are they? What are they talking about? How are they making waves? And I think something like that will probably, whether or not you think it is the most important issue in America right now, it has a certain sass to it. And I think it will punch through in a way that much of the rhetoric that has come from the Dems in recent months has been slightly apologetic, slightly awkward, not quite fiery enough to take some of the stuff that's happening before our eyes on. And one of the things that I just want to talk about in parenthesis before we move on to what's happening in Texas is the firing of the head of the Bureau for Labor Statistics on Friday. You might remember, first thing Friday morning, the jobs numbers came out. And normally, it's one of those things that you sort of see as a drop, or it might be in the FT, and people move on. And Trump this time couldn't move on because the numbers for last month, for July, in terms of the number of people in work, was slightly flat. But the numbers that had been revised from May and June were really revised downwards. In other words, signalling a 3-month trend that things were not going well. And what was awkward was that first thing Friday morning, Trump was sending out his sort of henchmen and women onto the airwaves, to say all is well, nothing to see here, the economy's fine. And by Friday afternoon, he had fired the commissioner, a woman who was appointed originally by Biden, but had been just as faithful to the data when Biden was in power. Indeed, her last jobs report in October was pretty brutal reading. And yet Trump tried to say that she had rigged the data, that she had been a political appointee, and that she wasn't talented enough at her job. And I don't think we can overstate the kind of shockwaves that this has sent around certainly the sort of US markets, but also the world watching, because once you try to shoot the truth, you're into a really dangerous game. And what Trump was doing there was essentially just trying to break things, like fire her, break that, tear up the data so it goes away. It won't go away. If the economic data is not good, people will start to see it and feel it, and anecdotally they will start to talk about it. And yet what Trump is doing once again is just trying to massage a number into non-existence, shooting the truth. It doesn't work.
Well, I think it also puts America in a very dangerous position. Whereas it's not only the rest of the world that will look at these numbers and say, can we believe what we're being told about the US economy, its growth forecasts, its labour numbers, if you're going to start appointing statisticians who are going to give you the numbers you want to hear rather than the numbers.
Right.
And I think that, even someone like Janet Yellen, who, let's face it, is more academic than she is politician, is saying that this makes America look like a banana republic. It's what they did in Argentina when inflation was spiralling out of control. It's what they've done in other countries that are going to hell and their economies are going down the toilet. And it just leads as well to a lack of confidence in the US. And going back to this UMass poll I was talking about a moment ago, this is also feeding into it, that people are getting angry. They're worried about the job situation. They're worried about inflation still. All these things that Donald Trump said he had solved, Americans are seeing with their own eyes that it's not solved, that there is still a problem there. And this is also hurting Trump as well. And I think that the move, with just going back to the move about the woman, Erica McIntyre, I think this will come back to bite him.
Yeah. In a way, it is not a big surprise. We've seen what Trump does when he doesn't like numbers. We've seen what happened when he was on that phone call with Brad Raffensperger after the 2020 election, the Georgia Secretary of State, and he said, find me 11,780 votes. Once again, if the number's wrong, Trump tries to change it rather than sort of accepting the reality of an actual election. But I think what tends to happen as a result of this is that you get people, already we've seen, I think, one of the deputies at the Federal Reserve leave, no reason given. Oh, I just think it's better if, I go off and do my stuff. You won't get good people into the jobs. And then people lose confidence in the organizations themselves. And I think the thing that is keeping America going right now, frankly, is its institutions. It's all those institutions at one remove from whatever is going on in the crazy government. And once you start undermining trust in those institutions, and I know it's a kind of boring subject, it's not a sexy subject to talk about, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, but actually it's so fundamental. I heard this great quote from Thomas Friedman today, the sort of columnist who said, trust is the one legal performance enhancing drug. And once you get rid of trust, once nobody trusts what your own bureaus are doing or the numbers that are coming out or the data that you are seeing, then people think, oh God, well, we don't really know what's going on. I think, well, we'll leave that alone. We won't invest. We won't trade. I'm not really sure what we're seeing there. And I think that has a massive knock-on effect.
And if you're Donald Trump, you look at the markets, which he always looks at, and the S&P 500 and the Dow, they're all looking pretty damn rosy at the moment. The markets have bounced back. So Americans looking at their 401k pension pots are thinking, oh, things are pretty good right now, which is, given the uncertainty.
Well, how does that tally? Explain that, because I don't understand how that tallies with...
a lot of people don't understand. You're asking the question. A lot of people don't understand how that tallies. But the fact of the matter is that the US stock prices are really high right now. Now, whether it's a kind of a false blip and the markets will come crashing down again soon, as some people are predicting, I don't know. But equally, you've had the chaos of the tariffs, you've had the economic uncertainty and what's going to happen as a result of the one big beautiful bill. People protesting at kind of town hall meetings with their Republican congressmen about what's happening to Medicaid at the same time as the economy seems to be doing really, really well in terms of the stock market.
Not the economy. Yeah, exactly. I guess there is always this lag effect, and that was one of the things he didn't like with the Labour statistics was that they seemed fine when they came out in June and fine when they came out in May, but these things get revised downwards. So sometimes you're looking at a sort of cross-section that will then be completely different in 2 months' time, and the stock market doesn't necessarily reflect, the revised numbers as we see them today.
And we'll be back in a moment to talk about what's happening in the Lone Star State of Texas, where the Democratic Party in the State House have fled to stop the Republicans gerrymandering the number of seats that will be up for grabs in the midterms. That's to come.
So we're going to turn to what's happening in Texas, where, as you were hearing, there are congressmen and women who have essentially fled the state to avoid being part of a vote which they say would have deeply undemocratic consequences. And full disclosure, I was going to leave you to this, Soaps, because you have a guest all lined up for this bit.
Yeah, we had a guest lined up, Jalanda Jones, and she is one of the state representatives who has gone to Illinois to stop this gerrymandering, which would in effect mean that you redraw all the boundaries for House of Representatives seats within Texas, and you will end up with 5 more Republican seats than you would have done beforehand by this whole process of redistricting and which bits of the population are included and which bits go into another area. And so the Democrats decided, well, the way we can stop this is by leaving the state altogether, because there will not be a quorum in the State House in Austin, Texas, to get this vote passed. Greg Abbott, the governor of the state, has issued arrest warrants for these people, for the Democrats who've left the state. And the woman we were going to speak to, Jalanda Jones, is in Illinois. And we've just had an email from her chief of staff, because we were due to be speaking any second now. And it's to our editor, Louis, who says, "Hey, Louis, I don't think Jalanda is going to make it on. They've had to evacuate her hotel for a bomb threat. She texted me that she is in a briefing right now and cannot log on. I'm so sorry. I'll get back to you and hopefully do a make-up interview. I'm hearing everyone is okay and hoping it was an empty threat. I'm sure it will be in the news. Thanks for understanding." So,
look, it is entirely possible that it's completely unrelated to anything and it is an empty bomb threat, and we all hope and pray that everyone's safe. It is also weirdly coincidental that a hotel that has so many of these people, in essence, kind of seeking a sort of safe zone to escape what is happening in their state of Texas right now, should at least feel threatened to this extent. It is disruptive, if nothing else.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the aim of the disruption. And that the person who made the threat, if we're right in our assumption that this is weirdly coincidental, it means that Jalanda Jones is not going to appear on the News Agents USA, and a whole pile of other state Congress people are not going to appear on the radio and TV appearances that maybe they had lined up, because they're all under Secret Service protection now, waiting to see the all clear about whether they can go back to their hotel or not. I mean, I just think it shows the fury that has been generated on both sides by the Republicans in wanting to introduce this and Greg issuing the arrest warrants, and the Democrats who feel that they have got to protest it.
Yeah, and John Cornyn, who is the senior senator for Texas, has actually asked the FBI to help locate and arrest all these, dozens of Democratic lawmakers that are kind of heading over the country. And so right now, I don't know if you're the FBI, are you chasing down the sort of escapees, or are you trying to protect them from a bomb threat? It's getting very confusing. And I don't think a British audience, I don't think we can even begin to understand properly redistricting, because it just seems so odd that you would do something so publicly and so sort of obviously that would, in essence, make for a more partisan area of your state. But, the Democrats are looking at what the Texas governor's trying to do and saying, well, I know you're trying to sort of firm up this state and firm up more of the areas for Trump. And clearly it's going a long way towards pleasing Donald Trump, this whole action. But you are actually cutting out people. You are changing the nature of who can vote in many of these places. And some of the Democrats are saying, look, this is an actual racial bias here. You are shutting out people of color. You are shutting out people who are more marginalized by sort of forming the areas in which, seats can be won or lost. And one response, which I have to say I wasn't really expecting, was from the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, who's now said, you know what, if Texas does that, we're going to do the same in California. In other words, we're going to play the same game. And he's now trying to pass a law which is only triggered if Texas goes ahead with their redistricting. And he's saying, well, yeah, fine. If you do that in Texas, I'm going to redistrict in California, and then we'll get our extra seats here. And so, it doesn't seem to me to be a sort of a place of particular moral high ground, that it does seem to suggest that the whole system is kind of screwed if governors can just play around with exactly how their boundaries are drawn, right?
Look, we are 60 years on from the passing of the act giving voting rights, making sure that elections were free and fair, that there wasn't discrimination against minorities, that you had to make sure that, the will of the people was heard. And here we are with what is happening in Texas, kind of with Greg Abbott's approval and arrest warrants being issued. And now Gavin Newsom saying, well, if you're going to do it, I'm going to do it. And we can all play that game. And you just realise the sort of how parlous this is and terrible it is for US democracy. And whatever happens, I suspect that the result of the midterms next November is that someone will cry foul and say these weren't free and fair elections, this is all unfair, and that will come from whoever loses the House.
Yeah, we've got J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois at the moment, saying if they're going to cheat, then all of us have to take a hard look at what the effect of that cheating is on democracy. That means we all have to stand up and do the right thing. So as far as I'm concerned, everything is on the table. We've come a long way, haven't we, from Michelle Obama's sort of, valedictory speech, really, when she was part of that convention for Hillary Clinton. And she famously used the line, when they go low, we go high. Going low didn't really work very well for the Democrats. Going low, as it turns out, just allowed more people to trample on your backs. And so what you're seeing here is something that feels a bit spikier, a bit more of a punch. What does J.B. Pritzker mean? Does he mean he'll, be happy to redistrict Illinois? Will the same thing happen in Maryland? Will the same thing happen, in the parts of the world that the Democrats are now fleeing? New York, I think, is the other place that they're going to sort of avoid this vote. Is that where it gets you? With every single governor redrawing their own districts, their own state boundaries, because nothing's off the table.
As I say, it's a very, very long way that we have travelled from the Voting Rights Act, from the Reconstruction Amendments in the 19th century that was meant to, presage a free, fair and electorate with, everybody able to vote in elections. This is America's repeated problem from the original sin of slavery and what happened with people being shut out of polling stations, and the ability of politicians and the willingness of politicians to kind of try and fix their own electoral district to make it more and more difficult for people to vote, which, honestly, for the problems that we've had in the British voting system, they are as nothing compared to what is happening in America right now and what has historically happened in America.
Recently, I made the decision that for now, I don't want to go back in the system. I think it's broken. And I always believed that as fragile as our democracy is, our systems would be strong enough to defend our most fundamental principles. And I think right now that they're not as strong as they need to be, and I just don't want to, for now, I don't want to go back in the system. I want to travel the country, I want to listen to people, I want to talk with people, and I don't want it to be transactional where I'm asking for their vote.
That's Kamala Harris, who stood for the Democrats against Trump last November and has only just given her first interview since then, and it was to Stephen Colbert on The Late Show. We should say that she's also got a book coming out pretty soon, so maybe you think of it as the beginning of the tour. But it is interesting to hear somebody who has been the Vice President of the United States telling us the system is broken.
The other thing that I thought was interesting about the interview was that she talked about, look, some of the stuff that Trump is doing, I predicted. What I hadn't predicted was the capitulation of so many Americans to this. And she was saying this on Stephen Colbert's show, which has been axed, and many people believe for political reasons, to please Donald Trump, because Stephen Colbert had been a pain in his ass for so many years. And CBS, the company that puts out The Late Show, was having talks, the parent company was having talks about acquiring a media company, needed regulatory approval. I know we can offer Stephen Colbert's Late Show up as a sacrificial lamb to get our deal done. And Kamala Harris was talking in that context.
Yeah, but I do want to get back to her a bit, because she's already announced that she's not going to be standing for the governorship of California. That was a role that many people thought that she would sort of go back in to fight. So, OK, that's off the table. Then she tells this audience, I don't want to go back into the system. I think it's broken. So how can you say the system's broken when A, you've been a part of it, and B, if you're campaigning to make the country better or to improve people's lives or whatever, I presume she would sort of give us her reason for going into politics, then surely that's when you go in, is if you believe the system's broken. So I can only assume one thing, which is that this is a veiled presidential bid. Yes, a presidential bid for 2028, and that she believes the only way you can get back into politics right now is by assuming the cloak of the outsider. I mean, almost impossible as the vice president, except look who else did it. Donald Trump has made a living off selling the fact that he is, an outsider. Of course he isn't. There's nobody closer to the centre of gravity than him. But maybe she thinks she's learning from him and saying, well, I have to remove myself from whatever the system is, because that's the only way I'll get people to listen again.
I am going to give you a wholly more cynical take on why I think that Kamala Harris has ruled out running for California governor. Look, she has to answer the question which hasn't been answered, which was posed in Jake Tapper's book about when did you know there was such serious cognitive decline? How could you have gone along with it for so long? And as soon as you put yourself up there for election, she can't just manage the one interview with Stephen Colbert. She's going to be campaigning around the country. There are going to be microphones under her nose the whole time. And she's going to be asked an awful lot about that particular period in history where, to be honest, the answers have been utterly inadequate from the Democratic high command about what they knew and when about Joe Biden, and were they lying to the American people for a very long time about his mental health.
Okay, I don't think that's cynical. I think it's spot on. So does that mean then she never stands for high office again? Or that she does? I mean, do you agree with me? Do you think she could be paving the way for something in 2028 because she thinks that's far enough away for the questions to have gone?
I think she could, but I think the calculation is that I need to let other, people come out of the woodwork who were close to Biden, and hopefully it will have less resonance. Because frankly, in the highly unlikely event, Mateless, that Kamala Harris's second interview is with you and me, and we're going to sit down and talk about what we're going to ask her. We're going to say we need to ask about Biden and his health, and she doesn't want to go there.
And I would say never on this podcast.
That's always our motto for life. Never say never to anything.
Come on, Kamala. Never say never. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
The Newsagents USA.